Alrighty. Everything seems all good. So I see that there is actually a delay of when I start streaming and me quickly going to the webpage of the article. Eh. At the very least, I know that it works. But, you know, every person's experience will vary greatly. Oh, yeah, my bad. Let me just put that aside. Alrighty. And we shall just start up pretty much his article, finally, since now I actually know the context until it reached to this last article that just talks about what is pretty much war and stuff. Showcases a bigger debate about talking about a war game and how making a current modern day real life war into a video game is controversial and some challenges with it, all the way back to 2009. Granted, it is a bit different now, because I figured that due to the fallout of controversy with this new uh, issue when it comes to 6 days in Fallujah versus back then, it certainly has changed, especially with what the situation is when it comes to depicting coalition forces in the Middle East. Um, so yeah, that actually brings upon it. I mean, that's even currently the situation when it comes to near peer threats and pressure. And today, video games about current, like example, Battlefield 4. So yeah, it does showcase some tricky issues about that, about the topic and such. But anywho, let me just get started with talking about this and talk more about it later. Making a game out of today's war. Mike Hahe at 2009. Uh, this actually showcases pretty much the old, on your left side, old screenshots of the video game and how it looks pretty different. And right is real life shows of the battle in Fallujah with the US Marines. All broke down. One notable thing about it is about the war is that it showcases the operations between coalition forces going in to Iraq and trying to topple down Saddam's regime and any hostile threats around, versus around the time of Battle of Fallujah, so around 2004, where it was an occupied force. I mean, the Battle of Fallujah was one of the major battles that took place while being the occupied force in Iraq, and two, it was the first big threat of insurgents around the area, not Saddam's forces or Saddam's Ba'athist loyalists or uh, resurgence groups are coming from it, but their own organization, their own entity, and it does showcase a new threat. That's one of the reasons why Battle of Fallujah is a infamous event in the occupation of Iraq. And yeah, even showcases that between pretty much the troops who are actually in Baghdad versus them actually going into Baghdad, especially with all the uniforms, the changes and stuff like that. It does showcase how the shifting times started becoming apparent. I mean, you know, analyzing between what is the tensions between the U.S. military around 2003 and then 2004. It wasn't a year off that they invaded Iraq. You know, put in that perspective makes you wonder the hecticness with the event. But not much talk about it, surprisingly. But maybe that's the thing. It being what, almost 2 decades old now, it's going to talk. People are going to analyze it more and more and more when the time comes. The video game industry was about to get its first major game based on the current military action, only to have publisher Konami pull the plug. What's wrong with releasing a realistic war video game? 6 Days in Fallujah, which was announced and then abandoned by its publisher last month, was a game both hyped by its developer for its potential to be a game documentary and scrutinized by game critics who questioned some of its Gears of War influences. To the public, it became a flashpoint, a warning in video games perhaps going too far. Something I just remember when Gears of War came out is that, oh boy, that was a popular IP. A lot of people really loved it, and it showcased a lot of things. One has to do with a new video game franchise for the Xbox 360, and a lot of people playing it for the multiplayer by itself. Because remember, Gears of War didn't have a horde mode. It wasn't until Gears of War 2, which Gears of War 2, when it released, it's like they literally take the base of everything good in the game and just expanded it outward. It was just a phenomenon. I mean, that was the case for Gears of War 1 till Judgment, which Judgment was its own set of issues that they really didn't add. I think the best way you could see it is what some people felt when it came to Reach, but with Reach there was a lot of things to love versus Judgment, which, looking at the player count, even before MCC, yeah, it was not that great. Judgment really fell off, but that's how it is. Even to an extent, Halo 4. At least with Halo 4, it started getting revived. I mean, after Halo MCC. That makes me wonder about how Gears of War Collection is going to be, like, if they actually put it out for 1, 2, 3, Judgment, and any other title. Which, I definitely want to see that. Besides that, Gears of War was also a changer of so many themes and some trends that, oh my god, it influenced a lot of cover play shooters, which ironically enough, with its Gears of War influences, you could even say it even influenced Spec Ops the Line due to its gameplay and some techniques and some storytelling related to the gameplay as a third Gears of War clone. Which, Spec Ops is mainly told for its story, its characters, and levels, rather than the exact gameplay. I mean, levels even to an extent, but yeah. Not talking about the multiplayer. The multiplayer is just just wish wash. Other company just were job to just do it just because they just need to do it in multiplayer and that's it. Ironically enough, it was the same people who created Bioshock 2's multiplayer, which was fantastic. I loved it. But, I'm gonna make a good game about it. Anyhow, also, the funny note is also just making a lot of grimy, brown, blackish backgrounds, which was pretty much true with the what is it? 7th gen? No, it's not 8th gen, 7th gen consoles. Or pretty much the gens for 360, PS3, and Wii. Yeah, that is the That is the storiness legacy of Gears of War. People forgot, but yeah, Gears of War was such an awesome IP. Is a game like 6 Days of Fallujah even necessary? Coming out in favor, obviously, in Fallujah developer Atomic Games president Peter Tammet, our point is that video games are interactive and they're the medium of choices for an entire generation, he told Kotaku this week. Therefore, we should use this medium to deal with relevant issues while they're still relevant. What obstacles are keeping the industry from tackling the sensitive subject of real life world warfare and that divides the experts? My bad. All right. The question of fun. It's not a great start that the creative director of Atomic Games is the one hand talking about trying to present the horrors of war and the other hand making entertainment. Dan Roshthal, a Rock War veteran. When approaching a game that realistically depicts a modern combat situation, one criticism that often arises is the subject of fun. Can a realistic military shooter be fun? According to a writer, a game designer, and Georgia Tech professor of media studios, Ian Bogust, that's the wrong question to ask. I should use that worse. We use the word fun as a placeholder when we don't even really know what we mean when we look for some enjoyment in a serious experience, he said. Fun entertainment aren't mutually exclusive, especially when it comes to entertainment based on real world military conflicts. Alrighty. As Bogust explains, fun isn't the key word in this situation. Okay. It may not be possible to make a realistic war game that is fun. War is not fun. But it is possible to create an experience that is informative, appealing, and startling in a positive way. Bogus cites the example of Black Hawk Down, the film adaptation of Mark Boden's novel about military forces attempting to capture Somalia war leader Mohammed Fari Adid during the Battle of Mogadishu. It isn't the sort of movie you walk away from feeling good or happy, but it was a positively engaging experience for many film goers. It wasn't fun, it was fulfilling, and by extension, entertaining. Yeah, I mean, it was an enlightening experience because I can confidently say enlightening because enlightening can be so many experiences that just enlightens an individual of them understanding something, them being informed, having enjoyed an experience. Entertainment is awfully weird because the way I think about it is even before like wide media, like even movies as an example, people have been entertained with some things, even when it comes to things that can be considered gallow humor, dark humor. Because the gallow is a pretty dark place. And it does showcase that entertainment is a thing that exists even for when it comes to morbid or taboo subjects. The thing though is just when it comes to being part of an entire entertainment media. And that's something a lot of people do have a hard time trying to string it all together. And that's always a difficult topic because media, entertainment media itself, the way I keep on thinking about it is that there was a time that a lot of people loved the idea of exploitation movies, which that is something a lot of people try to not go with in the film industry and stuff like that because exploitation is exploitation of people and different subject matters and stuff like that, and trying to treat them with sensitivity stuff led the way away from exploitation. And that's something I can remember when it came to, what was it, one of the people who are creating the movie American Psycho. But yeah, it does show that there is a controversial thing about it. And, that's the thing with the entertainment media landscape. It's the landscape media, it's not the entertainment itself. So I think this is pretty much what I wanted to say about that, which made me want to think about this along with other things like a war documentary for other articles that I read for the future. So pretty much recent 6 Days of Fallujah articles, especially with the whole IGN controversy and stuff, and the interview that I'm going to read later on, because I do want to see if they actually will keep the same, and if so, will they expand more about it. So yeah. Handling sensitive material. Retired U.S. Army Colonel John Otto is an author and a game developer, but he also spent 30 years of his life serving in the U.S. Army. From his unique perspective as a game industry insider who has led soldiers on the level of a platoon to a regiment, Anatol has his doubts that the industry could handle such a sensitive subject with the reverence it requires. Alright, I might as well do my sheepish voice because I haven't tried it, and in real life, he probably just has a deep, dark voice too, commanding and such. So, you know, voices don't always match up. There is a vital, there is a vital and a very important role for video games and interactive entertainment in recording historical events, Anatol admits. But when you are talking about headlines, real situations involving real people, you really have to treat the subject with a great reverence or it will fail. There are few interactive entertainment companies that even come close to being able to handle that properly. The current war is perhaps more sensitive and politicized than any previous conflict. Every day, critical information of tactical importance is being transmitted. Horrifying images of soldiers wounded and killed in action begin to circulate within days of the conflict startling. Anatol compares this to World War II, where the first images of the dead U.S. soldier didn't appear until very late in the war. Just because we have easier access to information than ever before, doesn't necessarily mean we should use it. I have to disagree with it, because this is something I definitely know about, and this is the power of hindsight. So from a 2009 article of someone who actually had had some sayings around that time, and how now in the future that conflict has already been way off. What about it? The new threats now is it's pretty much the Cold War and the proxies between Yemen with the big players of Saudi Arabia and Iran. And even then, the U.S. seeks better relations with Iran when it comes to figure out how to handle Afghanistan. Due to the occupation in Afghanistan, it's now wind down. So, I definitely want to keep an eye on if he ever talks about it again. But also, the second thing I just want to let you know is, yeah, I remember about how people are referring to what has happened in Iraq, the invasion of Iraq, not really Afghanistan, because Afghanistan was a neutral situation there after the occupation, after the start of the occupation, because before that there was actually just some news real about the U.S. Rangers actually going to Afghanistan and actually doing their bombing runs in order to liberate the country, and not much about the Northern Alliance and how many special forces in the CIA were doing the operations around the area. Which, the power of hindsight, it's amazing. And And the thing I do know is that people really were afraid of trying to label uh, Iraq as being another Vietnam, because Vietnam was a very controversial war. And the thing about Iraq and its controversy is it goes back to it being a controversial take, take, not really opinion, uh, talk about it, because people who actually would even jab on the topic was controversial, and some people were able to take some takes before they couldn't release their opinions. I mean, it's famous enough that some news anchors who actually were opposed to war and wanted to speak out couldn't, and they pretty much lost prestige, and the careers were sort of tampered. I mean, some background dealings when it comes to Fox News, when it comes to CNN, and all that. And there is some shady stuff even to today, where CNN actually doing a very great job when it comes to doing a lot of its broadcasts about the Shock and Awe campaign and footage about that. So there was some benefit to do that. I mean, that's the thing when it comes to news and when it comes to journalism, where there's things that if you want to be ethical about and report, is to not let the biases, don't let agendas, don't let anything influence your work. And it does happen. There's a reason why there's a big ethical guidelines. So a lot of people try to uptake and respect. But anywho, that's one part. Another part has to do with now, in hindsight, nowadays people do say that it is like Vietnam, because learning about so many people's stories takes people are able to share their stories. Yeah, it might even be because large access of internet by a bunch of people and news itself is allowing many places in the Middle East to know. I mean, in the 2010s, the Arab Spring that started bringing a line with so many issues when it came to Egypt, Libya, and later the beginning protests and the Syrian war, civil war. That does showcase a big, huge change of manner, especially with the large growth of Al Jazeera, which was famous because when it came to Iraq, but later expanded it because of the large international audience. Something I remember when it comes to in the United States is that, and I don't recall this because this was actually before I was conscious about it, was that with President Nixon, Richard Nixon, he was a controversial person due to Watergate. But while he was, but afterward when he dies, that's when a lot of places were actually talking about the Watergate scandal and how devious it was. It's not really controversial that he did illegal acts. He lied under an oath too, and he did shady dealings. But while he was alive, people really didn't want to talk about it. Uh, One famous thing from a story from, I believe, one uh, news video about these guys actually talking about their experience about going to museum as their kid, is that they talk about Richard Nixon, but they didn't talk about Watergate that much. And people seem in the museum just say, "Oh yeah, he was known as this, that, but he was an American president and did all this good stuff." And it does show that people have different sayings when time goes through, especially when people die. Or, example with Iraq, there's a new presidential administration that changed, a different U.S. military, current events that are way different than what it is now. Even though with the situation in Afghanistan is our longest war to date, and we've been there for a whole long time, it's still just took a backdrop, especially when it comes to near peer pressures and the Cold War in the Middle East, along with some issues like radicalism around Africa. So yeah, that's the reality of it. Oh boy, I've been talking about so much. Can I cover all this? Yeah, I can. Let me finish this up. I have a few minutes. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Talks about this. Yeah, we talked about that. Alright, let me finish this and talk my opinions after I finish. Alright? As for Atomic Games immediately working with Iraqi insurgents on the development of 6 Days in Fallujah, the former army colonel was quite clear of his opinion of that matter. If you're working with the enemy, that's called treason. The hottest killing our people today would love to get a larger audience to perpetrate their hate. If you think that reporters and filmmakers and interactive entertainment developers are not part of the world and their actions have no consequence, then you're wrong. There'll be no virtual world in a real world run by the Taliban. The problem... I'll talk about that with GTA and other video game mods. The problem of public perception. If the distinction between fun and entertainment confuses the game industry, one can only imagine that it does to the general public. A large portion of the which still see video games as light entertainment. Take the reaction of former Colonel Tim Collins, a decorated Iraq War veteran who spoke up during the early days following the announcement of 6 Days of Fallujah. It's much too soon to start making video games about a war that's still going on, an extremely flippant response to one of the most important events in modern history. It's particularly insensitive given what happened in Fallujah, and will certainly approach the release of this game. In a time where movies, documentaries, and books pertain to the war have already been released, often to critical acclaim, the news of the video game covering those same subjects is referred to as flippant and insensitive. According to Bogus, reactions like this are part of the ongoing media literacy problem. People are not willing to accept the fact that video games, like any other entertainment media, are capable of handling a serious subject with the respect it deserves based off of media coverage of a game which only tangible assets such as a handful of screenshots and a short video clip, a large portion of society was ready to dismiss 6 Days in Fallujah. Society. Conflicting statements between publisher Konami and developer Atomic Games certainly didn't help that matter. Speaking to the Wall Street Journal, Atomic president Peter Tammet is quoted saying, "For us, games are not just toys," while in the same article Konami states that, "At the end of the day, it's just a game. We have to insist they're not subject that's off limits and there aren't things that we can't do." Okay. Bogus said, "We can do it more and less effectively, but there is no sensible that we have to account for." Some might say that dangerous thinking, including John Antol, every author, every filmmaker, every interactive entertainment developer creating a product is responsible for what it does and after effects. Aristotle wouldn't agree with that. Extreme statements aside, Bogus has hopes that the situation is slowly changing, sending the most unexpected catalyst, Nintendo's Wii Fit. Not only does the peripheral attract a whole new audience to the gaming market, it also affects them on a deeply personal level. The key to changing the public perception lies in letting people know that games can be about much more than simply sitting on the couch shooting at aliens. As silly as may seem to hardcore gamers, Wii Fit does that. Just that. It's ironic to think that Nintendo's focus on a wider audience. And that's pretty much it. Oh wait. As for 6 Days of Fallujah, developer Atomic Games remained quiet on the subject of finding a new publishers, instructing those interested to stay tuned for further developments. While some remain firmly opposed to the project, others believe it's a game that needs to see release. As Bogus puts it, if only to be another example of how to do things well or poorly. Well, that's a good chunk to read. And oh my god, they actually talk about this. That is a perfect example of what I wanted to talk about, with the difference between what people are not covering with 6 Days of Fallujah and what it might become. But I'll talk about that later. Along with some other stuff after reflecting about this next time I show up. Oh man, can't wait. But, I can always wait. Other than that, whoo, whoo, whoo. Ciao.